So the first book I read this year was Sweetbitter by Stephanie Danler. Stephanie Danler grew up in Seal Beach, California, and she moved to New York when she was 23, similarly to the main character in her debut novel, Sweetbitter. In 2014, she sent the manuscript for this novel to an editor at Penguin, who was a regular at the cafe where she worked in New York. She also wrote the pilot episode of the television adaptation of her novel, and in 2020, she published a memoir called Stray. In 2022, it was announced that she would have a new novel forthcoming, Smog, which is set to be published in 2025. First of all, so glad I finally read this book. This is one that's been on my radar for a while, and I'm so glad you picked it for me. You always pick the right book for me at the beginning of the year. And it was great because it knocked off a couple of goals for me. This was on my 24 in 24 TBR, so it's one of the books from that, and it's also one of the lowest rated books on my shelf. So it knocked off a couple of my goals, which is great. And on top of that, a mashed potato book. So this book was really good. I was really nervous going into it because it has really mixed reviews. Like, it has a really low average rating, and a lot of people hate it. A lot of people complain that the characters are really pretentious, and I didn't really find that to be a problem at all. But for those who don't know, this book is about a 22-year-old woman named Tess who just like kind of drops everything to move to New York. She just like has everything that she owns packed into a car, and she just like gets a little place with a roommate and gets a job at a restaurant. She kind of shows up not knowing what she's going to do, and she ends up getting this job at a restaurant as a back waiter. And it's what I like about this book, though, is that she doesn't go to New York with like grand aspirations like you often see. Like, usually in movies and books about New York, people are like, oh, I want to be an actress, or I want to do whatever. You know, everybody has some kind of dream. She just wants to live a bigger life than she was living before, and so she feels that moving to New York, moving to the big city, will just like give her a more interesting life. So that's like the reason she does it. And then she gets this job as a back waitress, and then it becomes her dream to become a waitress, and she's like, I want to be a really good waitress. I want to be like the best I can be at this, because this is where I am right now. I just want to do everything I can to be good at this. So I found that really interesting, because you don't often see people with like smaller aspirations, I guess, in like New York-y books. So I really loved that aspect. I also really liked throughout the first, I'd say like 2/3 of the book, the main character is unnamed. You don't know her name. It's on the back of the book, so I knew she had a name. I knew it wasn't like, you know, completely unnamed throughout, like My Year of Rest and Relaxation or something, but I just thought it was really interesting. I'm like, when are they going to reveal her name? And so she's kind of called like nicknames, or people just call her New Girl throughout the first beginning of the book. And then the moment that she's finally named is kind of like, okay, this is a big moment. You're like part of the crew kind of thing. Like, it's when she's fully
part of
accepted.
The ship, part of the crew. Part of the ship, part of the crew.
Exactly, exactly. So I thought that was an interesting kind of tool, which I was thinking about it while I was reading, but I was kind of like, does it mean something? Like, why does it have a name?
That's cool. Yeah, I like that.
It was really cool. And there's also some parts of the book that are kind of like, they're written almost like a poem. I can't even find one now, but it's just like a bunch of different characters will be like saying one line, and so it's like this big kind of like poetry looking page of just like one line after another. You don't know who's talking, you don't know who they're talking to, and it just kind of shows you like a glimpse into like a moment in the restaurant. It's just like so many different things are happening. It's kind of chaotic, so it really puts you in the mind space of a chaotic restaurant, which is really cool.
That's so fantastic. Yeah.
And yeah, I just found it really fascinating. It also goes really deep into like how substance abuse is a huge thing in the restaurant world. Also, this is set in 2006, I think. That's another thing that I forgot to mention. So it's like only a few years after 9/11 in New York, so that's kind of mentioned as well. So it has a lot of like interesting things going for it, and it's very beautifully written. I would say for people who like beautiful writing, it's definitely written in kind of a poetic way at times. And yeah, it was just very interesting.
So why do you think it has such a low rating?
I don't know. I really don't understand it, because the characters are kind of like hoity-toity in a way. Like they're really obsessed with wine. Like one of the main characters starts becoming like really obsessed because one of the people who's been at the restaurant for 20 years or whatever is like this super knowledgeable person about wine. And so she's like, okay, I'm going to start studying. And so they're really like, you know, I wouldn't call it pretentious, but like they just like know a lot about wine and like how to pair it with food and everything. And so they just care a lot about it. They have a lot of like care for food and for the things that they serve and all this kind of stuff. So I don't know, maybe that's annoying to people. Like, I don't know. I really liked it. And it's funny because I've heard from other people who really love the book too. They're like, what? I'm surprised that this is so like kind of universally disliked, because a lot of people also love it. So yeah, I don't know. Just depends on the person, I guess, but I had a lot of fun with it. I wouldn't say it's a new favorite, but it's definitely like I really liked it.